Hello, everyone. I'm Professor Sidney. And I'm the director of the Institute of Advanced Studies. That was great. Welcome. Welcome to the Institute of Advanced Studies for those of you who are joining us in the International Hub and those of you online. We run this event, like all our events, hybrid, and it allows us to have people from around the world joining us. Joining us today is Professor Jane Davidson. Jane, we're so excited to welcome you back today. You've been with us before. And it's just wonderful that you were able to come and spend the whole month with us, nearly a month now. And we're really looking forward to the presentation today. As some of you probably already know, the Institute of Advanced Studies is the home for the international fellows here at the university, and it's the place, I think the most exciting place in campus, where trans-disciplinary talks that matter happen. And today Jane is going to talk to us about nature, art, science, theory, justice, you name it, it's all going to be there. So we're really, really looking forward to this. Before we go to the introduction and the main part, I just want to remind, particularly people online, a few things. So the lecture will be recorded, but we are recording but not publishing the Q&A part of the session. The video of the talk will then be released on YouTube as a video and also as a podcast. If you have any questions for Jane, we will have Q&A session for people in the audience as well after the talk. So for people online, please post your questions in the question and answer thingy that you see on your Zoom, and Kieran will be looking after that, and we will be taking questions in the room as well. So, introducing Jane today is our very own Professor Marcia Miskimon, the former director of the Institute of Advanced Studies. Marcia, we're really glad to have you here today with us, albeit unfortunately online, and over to you for the introduction.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ksenia. And I've been thrilled to keep watching all the amazing things that you're doing at the IAS. So it's wonderful to kind of come back and be able to introduce somebody. And I've been really enjoying the time that we've had with Jane, which is something that everybody used to say when I was director, that it was so wonderful to be able to work with your fellow for a month, and it is. So I can say it works and it's wonderful. So many, many congratulations for the whole kind of process. It's a really great delight for me to introduce Jane today. Jane Chin Davidson, who is an IAS residential fellow, but indeed is being welcomed back to Loughborough because she was indeed part of the 2022 Transitions Festival. Jane is Professor of Art History and Global Cultures at California State University, San Bernardino, where she is also the head of the university-wide DEI, and so to translate that for the UK, the EDI initiatives across her institution, and where she has already had an absolutely transformative impact on their curriculum and as well on the institutional culture. And the stories are amazing. So those of you who are interested in this might also want to talk to Jane in that context. She is the ideal person to do that, however, because her scholarship is so profoundly built on questions around global practices, culture, rethinking institutions, and looking at the way in which aesthetics and ethics work together. It's as a scholar and curator that I first came to know Jane through her outstanding publications that work across contemporary global art history, performance practice, curating, collecting, and museums culture, especially with a focus on what might now be called transnational Asia or transnational East Asia, which is a really interesting and very dynamic area of practice. Publications are way too numerous to list, but I am going to pull out a couple on purpose. Staging Art and Chineseness, Politics of Transnationalism and Global Expositions, which came out in 2020 and through MUP, which is her monograph. Fabulous work, and one of the early indications of how an eco-feminist engagement with contemporary transnational art might be able to tell you something slightly different and give you a new way of looking at it. So a wonderful, wonderful monograph for those who are interested. Edited collections include Global and World Art in the Practice of the University Museum from 2018 with Sandra Esslinger, and a special issue of NKA with Alpesh Patel on Okwai and Weezer's curating. So again, the museum, the collection, the institution, and the way in which those practices so profoundly form what we understand as a kind of canon, but also what can and can't be understood or can and can't be seen in the arts. So really rethinking those institutions. And most recently, an edited volume with Amelia Jones, Wiley Blackwell, 2023, A Companion to Contemporary Art in a Global Framework. And again, I've had the opportunity to read a few of the essays. It is a really amazing collection. And again, if you're interested in any of the questions around kind of decolonizing these practices and looking very differently at how we might understand what knowledge production is, it is a fabulous, fabulous book. Jane's work has been very much pioneering around the kind of art history, performance, environmental humanities nexus as well. Her article on Indigenous stakeholders at Cherry River in Montana is really outstanding. And I noticed that there's a slide or two, so you will get a chance, but read it as well. It's a really fantastic publication and a really groundbreaking cross-disciplinary publication. And she's currently working on something that I think is going to be immensely valuable, which is an international genealogy of eco-aesthetics. And has been here in part also as during her fellowship, looking at the fruit root, which is on the screen in relation to some of this. Again, immensely valuable. And again, a production, a publication which will start to demonstrate that the global north doesn't always lead, nor do great male artists always lead, even though they tend to take the center stage. But the really important stories that come from Southern theory and Southern thinking in that volume. While she's here, however, she's been working with my colleague, Rachel Grew, who is currently laid up with a very damaged knee, but hello, Rachel, online. And we've been working on a special issue of Art Journal on trans methodologies and the notion of that in trans terminology being quite critical at this moment. I have had the pleasure of working with Jane a few times, and I can say that she is an amazing person to work with. Her incredible analytic skills, her critical skills, her coordination and management skills of everything. She is an unstoppable force. It doesn't matter how disastrous something looks like it might be. Jane will always find a kind of route through and so forth. But what I really want to say as well is that she is a hugely genuine colleague and friend in working. And I want to say that in my mother's terms, really, my mother would have called Jane a breath of spring. When Jane walks into the room, she really kind of lightens it. She brings something to it. She makes you feel good if you're not feeling well. She makes things work really well. She's a person who brings something to the space, a kind of charisma, and it's very, very wonderful to have had an opportunity to have her around for a month. And with that, I think we are all really looking forward to this talk. Jane, over to you.
Thank you, Marcia. You just, how can I give this talk now? I'm about to cry. The introduction, I just love you very much. Thank you so much. And I hope you feel better. Thank you too to Director Tumatina, I'm botching your name, I'm sure, but for inviting me to present a seminar at IAS. It's been a great honor and a great time as a resident fellow to work with Rachel and Marcia on this really important project for AJ, and fingers crossed, won't talk about it much. And actually to present and be with everyone in Loughborough, it's just been amazing. I can't tell you. Kieran and hanging out with Laura, hanging out with Connor. Where's Connor? But really, it's just, maybe I'm just loving post-COVID presence, it's just been really wonderful. And my time really though in research at LU has been around fruit roots, getting as many insights and perspectives as possible from those who reside with it to participate in it in the past and in the present. I've talked to Mita Strelansky, David Bell, Martha Wershing, and to come, Anne-Marie Colhane down south. And thank you to those who I've met in advance that I will be meeting with. I know I will be. And again, just let me give my thanks to everyone. I will begin with a statement by Marx. Karl Marx, I dare say his name, The life of the species, both in man and in animals, consists physically in the fact that man, like the animal, lives on organic nature. The more universal man or the animal is, the more universal is the sphere of the inorganic nature on which he lives. Just as plants, animals, stones, air, light constitute theoretically a part of human consciousness, partly as objects of natural science, partly as objects of art. Can you believe he said that? Partly as objects of art, his spiritual inorganic nature, spiritual nourishment, which he must first prepare to make palatable and digestible. Oh my gosh, that is fruit roots. That is totally fruit roots. Palatable and digestible. So also in the realm of practice, they constitute a part of human life and human activity. And what he's talking about is the species being that we all come to share, every one of us. And I've always returned to this in my study of performance, his earlier work that most scholars discredit because it's premature work, it's less scholarly, I don't know. He talks extensively about the species of humans and their relationship with nature in this particular piece. And I was really surprised too, just recently reading Judith Butler writing about Marx's very passage here in anthropocentrism, based on this very notion. She concludes that humans share a continuous interchange of the material and the spiritual, the inorganic and organic representation of nature. Marx merely asks us to imagine a unity, says Judith, right? Butler, that's what Butler concludes. And that's what's striking to me, is this acknowledgement that plants, animals, stones, air, light is theoretically a part of human consciousness, partly as natural science, partly as art. This is on par with today's artistic conceptualism. Fruit Roots, as created by Anne-Marie Colhane, 2011, raises very important questions around what it means to grow fruit trees on the campus of a university, much in the way that Marx pointed to nourishment and human consciousness, palatable and digestible. But at a university site as a place for higher learning, it is the concept we're engaging with. It's conceptual. It's not just the orchards that she plotted on a sculptural border of the campus. Here we have David Bell. I took this picture yesterday in front of Barefoot Orchard, where the events of the Jarvis Festival were just held in October, I believe. Solansky taking over for Anne-Marie, student staff, local community invited to come and enjoy the edible campus. I hope that everyone here could speak about it more than I never could go to it, being in California. Focus was to use jars. This guest artist, John Javi Sharma, invited to explore the ideas of memories captured in the making and eating of pickles. And on the right here on the screen is the very obvious photograph of a very successful transcendental orchard, crab apples and plums. I mean, I think the photograph even captures that success of its transcendental devise or design or expression. There's also the cider orchard of chestnuts and apples, the Freeman orchard of apricots and cherries. They showcase so many ideas that circulate around a fruit tree, could never really be museumified art objects. They are living things whose fruit trees do, who really can own a fruit tree? Can you really own one? On this campus, they take care of people, and people have to take care of them. It is a relationship. It's a circuit of different people taking care of them, arborists, groundskeeping. If the pandemic shows us anything, it is really about the politics of care that we are facing today. In our late capitalist era, a return to Marx asks us, Who owns the air? Who owns the water? Who owns the tree? And can we capitalize it? Can we celebritize it? Can we do the things that we reach daily online with a tree? My research as an art historian focuses on performance and performativity and its function in art and politics in the global context for contemporary art. In the past 5 years or so, coinciding with the pandemic, I've been looking closely at past and present environmental performances consisting of artworks that contribute a social and political advocacy on behalf of environmental issues, as well as works like this that are actual environmental actions. When Dominique Mizoud in 1987 and 1994 took years to remove garbage from the Santa Fe River in New Mexico as a ritual. These are her slides. She talks about this early work as a ritual, a meditation, which led to her taking more a spiritual path later in her artistic practice. But it is this relationship with the landscape, she expresses, that's fundamentally what I want to explore. Environmental performances tend to be engagements with sites and locations. They provide a structure or a premise for bridging different performative traditions, methodologies, and theories from a very diverse global context. I've been compiling a study of 1970s, 80s eco-feminist performances like Mizoud's, including many others like Betsy Damon, Newton Helen Harrison, Susan Steinman, Reiko Goto, Marilee Louderman Kelly's, to name just a few, in order to study the conceptualist vocabulary for environmental practice that these artists have undertaken and their particular points of view. The greater whole of my project, however, is to understand how performance conceptualism is translated, transnationalized, transliterated, transfigured by artists around the world, especially Chinese artists working in Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, which is where I started with a chapter on Yaking Tan, Xiao Fei, Cao Fei, and Wu Mali's, and by ecofeminism in my monograph that Marcia mentioned in her introduction. Staging art and Chineseness. Performance method and practice emerging in 1960s and 70s prevails, continuing to grow as a resistance to capitalist modes of art making, while enriching the meaning and provocation through performance legacies of diverse cultural traditions. This is really exciting to me that there is this legacy. For example, Chen Qiulin's 2003 video performance, Farewell Poem. The artist places herself and her performer partner in full Chinese opera dress amidst the devastation of the landscape in her hometown, Wanshan. This was a region located on the Yangtze River, situated on the fateful path of the development of the Three Gorges Dam. The hydroelectric plant is one of the biggest in the world. Chen's 9-minute video documents the extraordinary destruction of her hometown, capturing partially demolished buildings and a lot of gray rubble like we see here, while interspersed are glimpses of the beautiful river. And then jarring close-ups of the opera actors. Chen is invoking opera's most famous suicide scene, dramatizing the self-inflicted death of Chinese tradition, as well as the place of Wanshan through her embodiments of King Shangyu and his cherished consort Yu Ji. These are both figures based allegorically on the real general of the Western Chu states circa 200 before Common Era, and the opera's famous scene called, and everyone in China would have known, every every young person would have known the hegemon king says farewell to the concubine. It's a suicide scene that is part of Chinese folklore, even in the small countryside. Farewell poem is a stark reminder of China's rapid industrialization. The irony, though, of China's shift to capitalism is the change from the landscape of Mao's Marxist textbook ideals, illustrating an orthodox Marxist contradiction, really, especially at a time when these radical scientists, Paul Crutzen and Eugene Stormer, devised the Anthropocene timeline based on industrial revolution, late 18th, early 19th centuries. Controversial theory is that the creation of fossil capital, the great acceleration, marked the first time in Earth's history that irretrievable changes were made to Earth's systems. And that is why Chen's contemporary art use of the performance medium resonates not only through embodiments of opera signifiers from China's performance traditions, but especially through the legacy of conceptual expressions in our global moment. For an embodied activist practice that we see all over college campuses right now in the United States, her non-objectifiable performance of herself in the midst of ruin. Chen's use of video was important, though, for capturing this moment of devastation live as it was happening. But performance was developed in part because of its non-object capacity for art, a method of anti-commodity, anti-art object resistance. Happenings artist Alan Caprell once wrote, "Performance cannot be bought or sold." And whether you're talking about Debord and the Situationists, or Fluxus around the world, or High Red Center in Japan, the contemporary art medium was always international, if not global, emerging World War II, post-World War II as a European and US trajectory of conceptual art. And here you see Yayoi Kusama's demonstration against MoMA's complicity in the Industrial Museum complex, supporting war and profit, back in 1969, I believe, on the cover of the Daily News in New York. What happens to the anti-capital component of Yayoi Kusama's 1960 protest when it is actually, I took this image from MoMA's website. Her work is represented by the museum auction house circuit of the art industry. I mean, what happens to that? I'm just asking. The potential performance, however, has grown. It's the true sense of the medium outside of video, especially after the isolating years of the pandemic. Live engagements, face-to-face presence, its potential for creating community, and that's essential. The ability to bring people together. Powerful practice. Coalition building aside, the sheer capacity for creating a sense of belonging is particularly resonant after the years of COVID sequestering. Performance had always offered an alternative to capitalist modes of value, capitalist modes of exchange. Today, that means status and celebrity. Environmental performance's powerful ability to develop community could offer an effective strategy at a time when environmental crisis is right there with us. Extreme temperature change, drought, wildfires, atmospheric rivers in California. We're drenched, it's cold, it's California. At the same time, the arts are not really considered a serious contribution to environmental science. This is the issue that I want to explore today. The inclusion of Kusama's MoMA protest in the archival representation of MoMA itself shows how the arts are an industry all on its own, contained as a category. I've attempted to address the question of how to ascribe scientific value, bring research authority to analysis of environmental performances, First, by engaging a scholarly update to environmental performances and their archive through discourse and decoloniality. And second, by adopting scientific methodology. And I hope to just give you a little sense of that today. I've written about the concept. Here's Wangari Maathai's tree planting initiative in Kenya, 1976, a network of 600 community groups nurturing 6,000 tree nurseries. I mean, wow, incredible. I've written about the concept of decolonizing performance in my chapter for Tatiana Flores's book on decolonizing art history. And decolonizing performance is a particular genre in this discourse defined by scholars Norman Denzin and Ivana Lincoln as a form of critical pedagogical theater. Decolonizing performances acknowledge the detriment of colonialist capitalism to both indigeneity and the environment. I mean, that's the nexus. They cannot be inseparable. They can be viewed as struggles and interventions, performances, and performance events that can become gendered, transgressive achievements, political accomplishments that break through sedimented meanings and normative traditions. To this end, decolonizing performances are supported by the theory of the Capitalocene. And that's the other thing that I've been writing about is the Capitalocene in a rewriting of the Anthropocene, which attributes the beginning of crises and annihilation to both indigeneity and the environment, not in the 18th and 19th century, but by 15th century colonialist for-profit capitalism. Based on the Capitalocene timeline, the scene of environmental disaster had already come to pass when acknowledging the long history of the genocide of First Nations. In the same acknowledgement of the imperialism toward the planet, the colonizing of the planet follows the mindset of colonial conquest of both planetary raw materials and human beings, extracting resources, enslaving peoples. And in my study for Oxford Research Literature, I had adapted Jason Moore and Donna Haraway's argument that the anthropos, beginning of human intervention in the Anthropocene timeline, did not begin with 19th century industrialization. It was really capitalist colonialism's occupation of cheap nature and cheap labor. Most humans saw themselves as nature before this designation, worked through the new divisions of labor. I argue that the locus for decolonizing environmental performances can be found in the historical model established by Wangari Maathai, whose 1976 tree planting movement in Kenya would eventually be awarded the 2004 Nobel Peace Prize. Her innovative Greenbelt movement was considered a sustainable development for democracy and peace. But Maathai's work should be understood as a feminist work of environmental activism. She mobilized a coalition of Kenyans who acted on behalf of trees in direct opposition to the industrial deforestation of her country by the profiteering class of the wealthy elite, led by then President Daniel Arap Moi. Those were powerful people. They accused Maathai of being a woman who did not know her place. Maathai was beaten. She was arrested multiple times, but then her Greenbelt movement flourished, begun as a network of 600 community groups that nurtured 6,000 tree nurseries. But Maathai was not an artist. She had inspired artists of Rashid Areen to extol her significance, her influence in 2009 when Areen wrote that in his third text article that millions of trees have been planted and are still being planted every day all over the world. An avid scholar of trees, Maathai would eventually become the first female scientist from East and Central Africa to obtain her doctorate in biology, of all things. She was not an artist. Ireen's essay was critical of Joseph Beuys. His ambitious 5-year performance project, launched in 1982 at the site of Document 7, the contemporary art exhibition. Some of you may have heard of it or been to it. He enlisted community groups, schools, artists in Kassel, Germany, where the exposition is located, to plant 7,000 trees. What a feat, throughout the Kassel and throughout the region in Germany where Documenta is held. And you can see that each tree is marked by a planting stone with it. So it's a sculptural object. And they're remarkable now. They're 50 feet tall. You can see that since 1980s, when they were planted, they flourished. But why was Irene so critical? This is cool, isn't it? This is good. Irene had acknowledged that Beuys's 7,000 Oaks is one of the most celebrated artworks in the history of avant-garde. But did it achieve what it aimed to do? How much tree planting has occurred in the world as a result of this work, he asks. Beuys himself wanted in people's lives to be a regenerative activity, a model for regeneration. But how has it measured us, Irene, against the dynamics of everyday creativity? And Irene goes on to say that while Beuys's work has remained contained in the museum, even though that's outside, Wangari Maathai's tree planting, first begun 7 years early in Kenya in 1976, has become a global movement. Millions of trees have been planted all over the world. And Irene says, although the works of both Beuys and Maathai represent creative endeavors of human imagination, are concerned with everyday life, there's a fundamental difference that sets them apart. While the former remains trapped as art in an allegoric cocoon, institutionally legitimized as an achievement of individual genius, the latter enters life and becomes a part of a collective dynamics. It's that performative collective dynamics that Irene wants to extol and can never be bought or sold. At face value, Rashid is pointing to the space of the museum and the role of the artist in a system that, since Vasari and the Renaissance, looks to the artist as a genius, the museum functioning to heroicize both. Patriarchally, this is especially commanding in late capitalism. Genius today can actually mean celebrity, measured by social media clickbaits for artists. Rashid wanted to make the case for environmental change. How can arts really make a difference if Beuys's work is trapped as art in an allegoric cocoon? I'm wondering if multi-species justice can change the political ideal. The artwork of Anne-Marie Cohen here at Loughborough shows affinity with a particular community focus, a particular part of a collective dynamics is what Irene wants. Since first learning about the award-winning Fruit Roots in May 2022, when I attended the 10-year anniversary here at the IAS, I've been really thinking about the nature of its performative contribution to the arts and to science, both. Particularly in the academic context, the landscape of the university, rather than the museum. Guardian awarded Fruit Roots the winner of the 2014 university project for this very point. The Eat Your Campus was the first time in 25 years, says Peter Connelly. He had felt any true connection to the campus. He said, I felt encouraged to test bed artistic and poetic works on site and just enjoy the campus without feeling I wasn't supposed to be there. It's made a fantastic green space accessible to us as a family. That's so cool. Fruit Roots succeeded to create many communities, and that is not commodifiable. This is supported also by the student affinity group, the LAGS site, Loughborough Students Landscaping Gardening Society, led by Martha Warshing, and LU students like Cosmina, who returned to participate even after graduating. Like all performance works, the engagement of the viewer, soliciting an experience with audiences, is key to this artistic expression. The phenomenology of touch, smell, sound, taste, it's all very important to performance. And Fruit Roots, the Eat Your Campus Harvest engagement, exemplifies the phenomenological hallmark of the performance medium. And while my research into environmental performances endeavors to develop an archive of these kinds of works that espouse its phenomenological beauty, my goal is to understand the unique opportunities in biodiversity relationships between humans and non-humans, multi-species world. Scientific research component can be therefore applied methodologically, if indeed we go there. This goes beyond ritual aesthetic, because of course the arts are not scientific, right? Although more can be discussed about this long-held timeless ritual of planting that every single culture repeats historically in some shape or fashion. Multi-species justice is really important today because they are at risk. The model comes, of course, from indigenous cultures. In 2018, I was invited to attend a performance event in Montana, designed by indigenous scholar Dr. Shane Doyle, a member of the Absolute Good Crow, who collaborated with artist Mary Ellen Strom, a founder of the nonprofit Mountain Times art program, to stage Cherry River Where the Rivers Mix on the banks of the Missouri Headwater State Park for an audience of 300 people from the local Montana community. They came together at the banks of the Missouri River headwaters where the Gallatin, the Jefferson, and the Madison rivers converge. It's right there at the convergence where everyone is seated. You can kind of see that that's the confluence of all three rivers. They were presented with a mix of American music, Crow and Northern Cree singing, Metis violin, big band jazz, not all together, but in a series of musical expressions in 3 acts. The sound of the music of the rivers was always the backdrop, always the backdrop. The river was overwhelmingly the first sound you heard. And for those who attended, the visual, oral, phenomenological experience of nature was key to understanding different types of American music. The event succeeded to bring together the diversity of indigenous communities in Montana. I mean, it wasn't just the Crow there. Buried city and rural populace came, and the important entities whose survival on the human management of water was really the point made very well. Here's an image of singer Shakira Glenn, a member of the Absolute Good Crow. She stands above the audience in a 12-foot tall chokecherry colored installation designed by Jim Madden, Mary Ellen Strom, and Elena Razzle. Glenn stands at the top of the mountain crest where we're all seated. We all had to walk up to that crest and seat ourselves next to her. And then we then overlooked the water below, and on the boats were people playing music. this music was played in speakers. You can kind of see the speakers up on top of the knoll. And she started the proceedings by singing this incredible song. I mean, it was, people started crying right away. I mean, I start crying thinking about it because it's just, it reaches you, you know, it reaches you. Just, you can't explain it. You can't explain it. I mean, I've seen my husband cry listening to Tracy Chapman. So yeah, okay, we do. I mean, music touches you in a different way. And then these three acts of first her singing, and she's dressed in the color of choke cherries. They were, the part of the performance was to rename the river from its presidential names back to Cherry River, which the indigenous always called it, because of the choke cherries that grew around there. And people would, in the past, indigenous people in the past would come together around the choke cherry tree. They knew the place by the choke cherries, and that's what signified this conceptually, this choke cherry dress. Long before the European invasion, the headwaters were a place where a crossroads, a hunting and meeting area for the Northern Plains Indians, the Hidatsa, the Blackfeet, the Shoshone, the Crow, the Nez Perce, the Kootenai, and the Salish. Incredible. I mean, the variety of people that actually lived here before colonization, Doyle, Strom, and Mountain Time Arts worked together to devise a critical and conceptual process for using an art event to develop environmental advocacy through community meetings, social gatherings, research in diverse archives, engagements with musicians, with historians, politicians, Native American scholars, geologists, attorneys, archaeologists, water lawyers, conservationists, and ranchers. It was not a small thing that they did. I was just really floored when I was invited to go. The goal of Cherry River was to address the surging environmental problems associated with water in the upper Missouri River Basin. This ongoing conditions of severe and frequent drought resulted in 2021 declaration of a federal emergency from drought disaster in 31 of Montana's 56 counties. All of Montana's rivers and water sources derive from glaciers and snowpack. Geologists warn that only 25 of the 150 glaciers surveyed since 1850 remain extant at Glacier National Park. Water scarcity impacts a diverse population, and this includes the indigenous populations and the life of non-human plants, animals, beyond the rural populace of landowners, ranchers and farmers, also city dwellers, and those who come as tourists to Montana's Big Sky landscape. I had decided to develop an environmental studies paper and try to publish it in a scholarly science journal. How dare I? I'm an art historian. How dare I do that? This is the last of the ceremony. The last was around dance as well. There was a conceptual dance at the riverfront on the right up there. And at the end, we were in a drum circle and we all danced together. The singing came up from the river, from the boats, and the music came up from the river, from the boats. So you heard it from a distance as it came close, and then it came close, and then you were with it, and it enveloped you. It was outstanding and amazing in ways that I could never tell you. And then Grace King and Jaya King gave a ceremony, a ritual ceremony, and it involved Blackfeet, Crow, and Cree performances. It was really astounding. But how dare I write about it in a science journal? I thought I wouldn't get accepted. I was surprised that they did. And just recently, they shouted it out on X. I'm not on X, or what is that, Twitter? I'm not on there, but they shouted it out. So I was like, okay, that was 2022 when I published this. I had decided to give it a go. I was surprised they did. In the paper, I took a more data-driven approach. Can you see? I don't normally do this kind of, statistic, but why don't I, right? How come I don't? So I started to take a quantitative as well as a qualitative methodology to this study. And I did, however, state in my article that drought and environmental crises impels us to think more broadly about the role of the arts and of the humanities at large in environmental studies, a category that is increasingly extends beyond scientific disciplines to encompass non-scientific forms of scholarship, the study of performance in the discipline of art history and global culture. This is in the paper. I couldn't believe they published it. Provides a way to understand the effective emotionality of environmental issues in a very public way, argued as a more empathetic approach to bring together disparate stakeholders, which we all are. So this was through Cherry River's innovation of indigenous and non-indigenous forms that I felt like really made this a unique experience. And let me end my little talk here. I know that we are limited by time with Ichi Akita. And the question that I want to pose to you, can the arts and performance really contribute to environmental advocacy for real? We think that it is just the arts. Can it really acknowledge a different perspective for understanding ecologies and therefore expand the transdisciplinary process for engaging in environmental studies? Performance has been a way for artists to confront devastating environmental crises and also offer consolation and hopeful solutions from different global and cultural points of view, which I've shown you today, just very briefly. Directly after the 2011 tsunami in Japan and the Fukushima nuclear accident, artist Ichi Akita created the performative installation to provide much needed cathartic action for the 500 participants who worked together to clean up Uno Park and develop this artistic greenscape that he designed. If you look at his book, he shows the map, the landscaping. It's fantastic. So anyone could do it. So these greenscapes in Tokyo included the Wheel of Hope, 3 life-size vertical rings made from reeds. They're life-size, they're huge. They're as big as you are. The community performers led by performers, the community were the performers, right? There are 500 people, they're called performers. They were led by Akita to reshape the entire Shinabatsu pond and to create these water paths and create a whole different landscape from a pond and a park that was full of litter, full of needles, full of drug paraphernalia in the heart of central Tokyo. Akita explains how the title Wheel of Hope reflects a comment made by someone who said that they saw the pure land in the misty world that rises up ahead of what they desire. In the midst of the deepening confusion in the world, perspectives towards the light appear like hopes of each person, unquote. He offered that up to me. I thought it was beautiful. Invoking the Dharma wheel, the Buddhist sutras, as conceived in Japan, recognize the Pure Land's world of another dimension as the experience of life in the now, in the present, but viewed from the perspective of the next life to come. Can you envision a hopeful vision? This hopeful viewpoint through the wheel of hope emerges from Ikita's effort to potentially bring people closer after Fukushima. This was at the very moment after Fukushima, recognizing how greenscapes could engage humans in an embodied communal action. Not to mention that scientists have documented the way in which green space reduces air pollution, reduces temperatures, improves rainfall types, greatly affecting global warming. Ikita is known for his 1990s explorations involving the human's primary relations to water. He started out as a scientist and he ended up as an artist. He has long advocated for people to realize that water, source of our lives, is the medium to move beyond borders, beyond customs, histories, and cultures, in order to realize the profound exchange between human beings and an environment. Those are his words. Those are his words. The decolonizing expression by environmental performance can offer radical hope. Radical hope. That was my article for Tatiana Flores's book. Through non-commodity-based experiences, through emotionality, through the sense of community. The bodily oriented engagement problematizes the way in which materialist objectification is an all-consuming and everyday life. The dynamic sense of human connection with each other and with the local landscape changes our technological perspective. Ikita's Wheel of Hope is a focal point. Through the ocular lens of reeds stretching out into Shanabutsu Park, the viewer experiences a sensory effect of the kaleidoscope of nature. And through a Buddhist inflection of hope, Ikita acknowledges the personal impact of the nuclear accident that broke down communities and everybody in it. Crisis illustrates the high stakes of maintaining the hyper-capitalist industrial lifestyle of the Anthropocene's third great age of carbon. And Cretson and Stormer devised the geological epic to implicate all humans in the urgent demise of the planet. As we continue to live high energy consuming materials lifestyle, it bears reiterating that the divide between nature and culture was a product of the founding moment in capitalism.